in the night, your heart fills with dread. Probably a murderer who wants you dead. It could be a ghost, a demon, or worse. Perhaps you're the victim of a witch's curse. It's hopeless, you're doomed. You'd call a priest if you could. You'd rather just listen to who? Sinisterhood. Hello and welcome to another edition of Freaky Friday, where we tell your odd but true stories. It is Friday, June 21st, almost the last Friday in June. We only got 2 more to go, so happy Friday to all those who celebrate.
To all those that celebrate. Imagine if someone was like, the fucking week ends at Thursday and starts again on Sunday. Or Saturday. I don't observe Friday.
I don't
it's one of the best
Friday.
days of the week, so I would argue you should.
It's like that early episode when I was listing off all the planets and I just didn't say Neptune, and someone's like, you forgot Neptune, and I was like, I don't recognize Neptune and it knows why. I'm beefing with Neptune still 5 years later.
Oh, dude, I still consider
6 years.
Pluto a planet, and every time I'm like, I know it's not really, but it's hard when you are taught your whole childhood through high school that something is one way, and then all of a sudden scientists are like, oh, by the way, it's actually just a dwarf planet.
They're like, JK.
I would argue it's just a smaller planet, so it can still be a planet. But I'm not an astronomist.
Thanks a lot, astronomists, for prying Pluto from my hands
I love
under duress.
Pluto.
I know, under
Pluto
duress.
is so tiny. There's a Disney character named after it. But we kept Uranus, which literally has the word anus in it. I mean, of course
I want to keep my anus, but Uranus, I don't care about.
Then somebody tried to tell me it's actually pronounced Uranus, and I'm like, I don't think that's true. But you tell us, astronomy people, if you can let us know. Is it Uranus or Uranus? Or something we're not even saying?
Yeah, something that's correct that we're not saying. And after this rousing discussion of how much we know about space, come see us live, because we do a whole show about space with no qualification.
No, I'm talking about planets that aren't even them, but we do talk a lot about the moon, and we get a lot of information out that is correct. We fact-checked it.
Speaking of fact-checked, I have to make an announcement for anybody that's a moon fan out there. It is a full moon tonight. If you're listening to this, June 21st, it's at its best at around 9 p.m. Eastern, and it also falls on the summer solstice. So it's always kind of an exciting big deal when the full moon falls on the summer solstice. It's the strawberry moon or the rose moon.
What are we doing?
We got to do something.
Incantations?
Tonight we're doing it. We're saying tonight because this is the Thursday before, so we're going to set some sort of intention. I don't know.
I feel like we also have to do something on the full moon.
We'll do both. It's the full moon, they said, will be shining the brightest from the 20th through the 23rd. So by the time you hear this in the next 2 days.
Nice.
If you hear this on June 24th, I'm sorry, you missed it. You got to tune in.
You missed it by a day.
When the episode drops, and then you get the breaking news.
Sometimes we learn the hard way. So
breaking
next
moon
time
news.
you'll know.
Moon news.
Well, if you want to see us talk a lot about the moon and learn about spooky stuff you may never have heard of, legends, lore, cryptids, what really happened up there to those astronauts on the Apollo missions, we are on our full moon energy tour right now. And we have some dates coming up in just a few weeks.
We do. We are headed most pressingly, if you live in Ohio, Cincinnati, or Cleveland. I looked at a map of Ohio. I was like, damn, we're flying into the bottom of it, driving all the way to the top. So we're going to see
up through the whole state.
We're going up in you, Ohio. We're going to be all up in you. So as we always do, our call for fun, weird Ohio stuff, please let us know. But we're going not just to Ohio, we're going all over the place. First, we're going to be in Cincinnati on July 16th at the Funny Bone. Then on the 17th, we'll be in Cleveland. And July 19th, we're going to be in Toronto at the Comedy Bar. And in future cities, we're going to be coming to a place near you, including Kansas City, Oklahoma City, San Diego, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Dallas. So for dates, times, tickets, and more, go to sinisterhood.com/live shows. And if you know of anything weird, especially as we drive from Cincinnati to Cleveland or from Cleveland to Toronto that we should stop at, please let us know, because we love weird roadside stops. Like we stopped at that pea soup place going from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Just a weird place.
Sometimes the ones that we want to go to are like a 2-hour detour, so we don't get to go. But if they're on the way, yeah, we love a fun store, a weird, quirky roadside stop, or a pretty area.
Yeah,
we always love parks and stuff.
Largest whatever. I'm down to see a ball of twine or a covered wagon or whatever. So
world's largest covered wagon that has a ball of twine.
I feel
it's
like
a wagon covered in a ball of twine. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I think they sometimes do that, and they'll be like, well, they had a ball of twine and they had a wagon, and so we put them together, so we also get an award. And I'm like, good for you. Yeah, I'll come by and see it. But
it's efficient.
We can't wait to see you guys in person. That's one of the best parts of touring, is to see and hang out with everybody face to face. So come on out and see us. But until then, you all, another way we connect with you is all these Freaky Friday stories.
It is, yes. And I took a liberty in this first one, and I changed the subject line just a bit, like you often do for me, to on our Patreon segment. So I don't know the whole story by the title, but
yes.
So Mel, since you sent this first one in, just sometimes I take a little bit of creative liberties, and very rarely, because all of y'all are very good writers and I hardly have to do anything. But I was telling my therapist today, it's such a crazy window into people's lives that I am blessed to have, that I read all of y'all's stories, and it's just, thank you for trusting us with this, because these are some of the most like vulnerable, personal things you can tell someone. And one night I was really high reading some on my patio, and I just was like, I don't even know this person. They're in South Africa, but they're telling me about like something. And I was just like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But even sober, I would say I still agree with that.
No, it is. It is. That's one of the best things, is we're on tour and someone's like, I sent my thing in on Freaky Friday last year. It was thus and such story. And it's funny because we always are like, oh, we don't have like the best memory, but as frequently with Freaky Fridays, we're like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Because these are such personal stories. So I will echo that. Thank you. And it is a window for all of us to say everybody has stories that none of us could ever know about. You know, your coworker at work, the person that was kind of snotty to you, giving you your breakfast sandwich at the restaurant this morning, some crazy batshit thing might have happened to them recently or in the past that you would never even know about. So that's why the teacher that I volunteer for had a thing that said, be kind, for everyone you know is fighting a battle you know nothing about, which she didn't come up with. It was like a famous quote, but
it's very true.
Yeah, it's such a good reminder. So thank you all for being vulnerable, because it's not easy, but sure helps a lot of people, I hope, the ones that get to hear this. At least us. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. I talked a lot about this today in therapy, so thank you all so very much. Well, I'm Christy.
I'm Heather.
And let's get freaky. As I said, this first one's from Mel, and the subject line is, my mom was stalked by a serial killer. Hi, ladies. Love you guys and the show so much. Let's get into it. I've been meaning to write this story in for a while now. I grew up in Seattle, which seems to be the serial killer breeding ground. What is it about Seattle? The rain 9 months a year? Anyway, in the mid-70s, my mom was a young college student that was attending classes in the University District near the University of Washington. She has always been hyper-vigilant when it comes to her surroundings and always had an uncanny sixth sense. She spent a lot of our childhood teaching my sister and I a lot about paying attention to strangers, always keeping the door locked, and what people are capable of. This is more of the norm now, but not so much back in the 80s. She was in her early 20s, living alone in her apartment, and didn't have a car, so she took the bus to and from school and work. Each day, for multiple days in a row, when she would get off the bus to walk to her apartment, she would notice a young, good-looking man watching her as she got off the bus. She took notice, but didn't think too much of it, as he never did anything that sent off red flags. Being checked out by a guy wasn't unusual for her, but she did acknowledge the situation and the man and take note of him and what he looked like. She was an art student and was living in an apartment with her dog at the time and would stay up late at night working on school projects while her dog cozied up and snoozed next to her. One night, she was up very late working on a project for school when all of a sudden, her dog raised his head, stared at the door, and started to growl this really low, deep growl. It put her on edge immediately. It was a growl she had never heard from her dog before. The dog then stood facing the apartment door, growling again, but she still hadn't heard anyone at the door or any noise. She slowly crept near the door and peeked through the peephole and saw the guy that she had seen watching her at the bus stop. He was just standing, facing the door, seemingly weighing out his options, most likely hearing her dog. The dog continued to growl. My mom told me he sounded like a wild animal or a wolf. I'd never heard him make a sound like that before or after. That dog sensed absolute evil and danger through that door. And thank God for dogs. We aren't worthy of them. That dog saved her life that night. The man ended up walking away, deciding that he didn't want to face off with the dog. It was only a few years later that she saw the same man's face in the news when he was captured. Theodore Robert Bundy. Ted Bundy. I wish I could hug and kiss that pup. I very likely wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for him. Thank you so much for reading this. I hope to hear it on the podcast someday. And shout out to my sister Lauren for turning me on to you guys. We can't wait to see you at a live show soon.
Oh, baby dog, you are a hero. That is, when they make that sound, something's different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you've heard your dog, everybody with the dog knows, like, they have their normal, like, somebody walk by the front door bark, but it's like, you hear that.
Yeah,
and you've never heard it. You're like, what is going on? One
single time it happened with Buffy, and she's a pit bull, but she's notoriously friendly, sweet. She's a baby. When I take her to doggy daycare, they're like, oh, Buffy. They just love her. She's so sweet. Never has ever been aggressive to anybody on a walk. She's never bitten anybody. She's just so friendly. And one time I was walking her, and a guy on a bench stood up toward me, and the sound she made, I was like, that's a demon in that dog. Oh. And I just went, you need to step back, because I've never heard her do that before. And he was like, oh, hey, whoa. I said, I'm serious. Step back. It's not safe. And then he was like, oh, okay. And he sat down, and I very quickly walked away, and I was going to meet somebody and went the person I met and kind of told him what happened. But it's just something that she sensed that I was just kind of like, walking along, not thinking. And I'm like, thank God you were with me.
Right.
Cause that kind of
dogs are incredible.
It's not a pizza
dogs
man.
That can sense seizures and other types of medical emergencies. It's just, they've got a sense that we don't have. And this one sure did. And, to say the dog sensed evil through the door is an understatement. I mean, one of the most evil serial killers that has ever walked the earth was mere feet from you. And
yes.
I mean, why would you be there if you weren't gonna, and then you got a dog. But if you live by yourself, I think having a dog is one of the best security systems you can have.
Well, especially because, she said he's out there kind of sizing up, like, what should I do? How big does the dog sound? What do I want to do? And I think even medium to small size dog, God, I always laugh at how vicious the Goose is. I can't say she's so nice, and she's a Chihuahua. She's a demon. They all are. But I'm like, even a small one like her, I'm like, she'd go after somebody if they came at me. And if at the very least, somebody walking up on me, she notices in 2 seconds, I'll just be completely in my phone, not paying attention. And she's right next to me and I'm like, oh, a safe person is walking
you're like,
up.
My husband?
Yeah, my husband, my mom, a guest at Thanksgiving. She's just growling at them.
She's always ready to protect you no matter who it could be.
Yeah, so my dog is just a demon. But this dog, it's that's not just a delivery person. It's someone out there with nefarious intent.
It made no noise.
Correct. That was creeping. It's not like he knocked and was like, oh, I'm looking for Bob. Does he live here? Even so, don't answer it. But that book that people have recommended, I've never read it, but I keep wanting to, The Gift of Fear.
Gift of Fear, yeah.
And I was going to say, I just saw a couple people mention it on TikTok recently, so I may need to add that to my walk-in list or something, just because I think it's that same thing, is that we sense it too, but dogs have such a greater sense of, smell, intuition, whatever. They know what's up.
They do. And I'm so glad that that dog was in your mom's life. That is fucking terrifying to... One, you're like, oh, all the puzzle pieces are falling into place. He's been watching me, which clearly means he's also followed me to my apartment after I got off the bus.
Because he knew exactly where I lived. And not just, to my house. It was in an apartment. That's even eerier, too, that it's not the first time you've seen that person. Goddamn.
No, and then you see his face on the news, and you're like, whew, those near misses, they'll stick with you for sure. Well, thank you so much, Mel, for sending that in.
Sinisterhood will be right back. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep.
Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit.
Make delicious food a priority this summer with quick, convenient recipes delivered right to your door. Just choose your meals, select a delivery date, and HelloFresh handles all the meal planning, the shopping, and most of the prep, so all you have to do is open your box and get cooking.
And HelloFresh's line of kid-friendly recipes are picky eater proof and perfect for families looking to shake up their dinner recipe rotation while school's out for the summer. And let me tell you, this came in clutch last night. I would like to go on record saying Ella said, "This is the best chicken I've ever had."
Okay.
And Tommy made the honey Dijonnaise chicken.
Ooh.
And it was so good. And a salad that came with it with the ingredients, the apples and greens and everything. To have my kids be like, "Oh, this is the best thing ever," is very rare. So I'm like,
changer.
We'll make this every day forever for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, Paris made the make-ahead spinach potato frittata with sun-dried tomato aioli, and it's so good because I don't even have to make breakfast anymore. I just grab it and go because we made it ahead. Sometimes I even eat it for lunch, but that aioli, it takes it to restaurant quality. It was good anyway, and then he's like, don't forget the aioli. I was like, baby, I won't.
You can't forget that aioli.
Go to HelloFresh.com/creepyapps for free appetizers for life. One appetizer item per box while subscription is active.
That's free appetizers for life at HelloFresh.com/creepyapps.
HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.
This next one is from SRD, and it is called a Freaky Twintuition, which is a great portmanteau, by the way. Hi, guys. I know you guys like twin connection stories, and I have one for you that will stick with me forever. I have a twin sister, and although we are fraternal, dumb masculine word to use when twins can be any gender, but I digress, we've always had a weird little twin connection. It was mostly present/stronger when we lived together before both moving out of our parents' house, and I've heard other twins say similar, which I find super intriguing, and I suppose it makes sense. As little kids who had watched too many movies, we'd constantly try to read each other's minds, thinking if we concentrated hard enough, we'd pull a practical magic and be able to talk to each other through ESP. But alas, we were never able to hear each other's thoughts. As we got older, the connection would show itself in little ways. I would have a song stuck in my head, and she would start singing it out loud, or vice versa. And it was a weekly occurrence as teenagers that we would both come out of our rooms to go to school and be wearing incredibly similar outfits, despite not owning the same clothes. Like we would both have on a denim skirt, pink t-shirt, and white sneakers, or something like that. Shout out to early 2000s fashion. You get the picture. Only once did this connection produce something more meaningful that I don't have any other explanation for. We were in our early 20s, and my sister was dating an absolute dirtbag that we went to high school with, well known for using drugs, selling drugs, and constantly getting into trouble. At this time, my twin and I had some of the same friends, but her close friends were kind of the, quote, bad kids, and mine were more the, quote, preppy kids. She would sleep at her boyfriend's apartment sometimes, as one does. One night she planned to sleep there while I was at a friend's house watching a movie. Out of nowhere, I felt a completely overwhelming sense of panic that I can only describe as something telling me to talk to my sister, that something bad was going to happen, and to get her to come home from her boyfriend's. I called her and could tell she had been drinking, which is neither here nor there since we'd both drank socially for years. But I assume this contributed to how aloof she was, in contrast to my emotionally manic ass. I basically begged her to come sleep at home because I had a really bad feeling and I would just feel so much better if she slept at home. I even drove to the boyfriend's apartment and made her come talk to me in my car, where I continued my pleas to no avail. She kept telling me she's fine, everything is fine, she'll see me tomorrow. I went home with a pit in my stomach, but eventually fell asleep. Preface for the next part. I never have the sound on my phone on. If my phone made a single ding, I would chuck it into the ocean. I never understood people who keep the ringer on, especially at night, because who wants to be woken up by notifications? But at 8 a.m., I was woken up by my phone ringing out loud. It was my sister's best friend telling me she got an incoherent and hysterical call from my sister, and all she could understand was that something happened and my sister was in a hospital. Thankfully, my parents hadn't left for work yet, and I called local hospitals until we found her. Trigger warning for violence. Long story short, at like 1 a.m., when my sister, her boyfriend, and his friend were hanging out at his apartment, 2 masked men with guns broke down his flimsy apartment door and came in demanding money. For the record, this shithead had drug-dealing money in his backpack sitting feet away from him, but wouldn't offer it up. So the men beat my sister with their guns to the point that they cracked her skull. Was the boyfriend injured, you ask? Poor baby had a small cut on his forehead. With 0 fucks left to give, I went to the nearest police officer and ratted his ass out with every bit of information I had on all his illegal stunts. My sister went into brain surgery and now has metal plates in her head. Thankfully, she survived and is just fine with no brain damage. Sorry if anyone was in suspense about that. And while she was in surgery, I reamed out the boyfriend, screaming so much that security came and they made him leave the hospital. Since everyone was intoxicated that night and were unwilling to talk to selfishly protect their own asses, we will never know the full true story of what happened. What we suspect is that it was Shithead's boyfriend's dealer. Did you know dealers have dealers of their own? How cute! And an accomplice that knew SHBF would be rolling and knew he was also a dealer and therefore had money that would be easy to steal. The men with guns never got caught. The boyfriend never got in trouble, and my cortisol levels have never come down. I can only attribute my knowing something was wrong to a freaky twin connection. I could never have guessed that that was going to happen, but I knew in my gut that she wasn't safe sleeping there that night. As for how the sound of my phone was on, I have no idea, because I don't think that can fall under the twin connection category. However, I've always felt my sister, and maybe me too, has a guardian angel, since that girl has tested fate a few too many times and always came out unscathed. The moral of this story is, listen to your gut, and listen to your sister's gut, because she's probably right. I know I always am.
What? Twin connections like this? Like that
Twintuition.
moment, is it like when SRD got this feeling like, I've got to get up and call my sister? Is that the moment when the plan was like concocted and began in motion? And it's like whatever that ripple and energy in the universe is like, they're on their way. Like, and because, you know, that was a few hours before the incident even happened.
Yeah.
Just whatever
That's
it
true.
is.
Yeah. At what point do you like
That catalyst.
feel that? Yeah. Because at that point she hadn't been injured yet. And that is fucking terrifying to, have a home invasion is one of my biggest fears. But fuck this guy for just sitting there, and you could have thrown some cash, and instead you allow your girlfriend to be brutally injured to the point where you have to go into brain surgery.
Yes, and have metal plates in your head. This is not a scuffle, a couple scratches and bruises. I mean, this is like massive major surgery that, thank God, was not much worse. Like SRD said, at least she doesn't have any long-lasting effects or, you know, negative impacts. But yeah, it's one of those where you're like, I knew you were a fucking scumbag. Why am I even shocked? Like, I thought at the very least you would have stuck up for me. No, of course not. You're a fucking scumbag. And it sucks that nothing even ever happened to him or the guys that did it. It's just the best thing you can say is at least not only it was my sister okay, but like you said at the end, you're like, I was right for the rest of my life. Like, listen to me. Listen to my gut.
Yeah. He didn't stick up for your sister, but you sure stuck up for her. Because as soon as I'm like, give me the phone, I'll call the police right now. I'll report everything I know. I don't give a shit anymore.
Right.
This guy needs to be stopped.
I have no secrets for you, man. I hope you go to jail. Yeah, with that, I love twin stories, though. So thank you, SRD, for sending that in. And it sounds like y'all are very lucky to have each other.
Well, this next one is from Sarah, and it is called A Possible Third Man Phenomenon. Hi, ladies. Firstly, I just want to say how much I love Sinisterhood. I'm in the UK. Please come here on tour and drive around a lot for work, visiting clients, so your podcast keeps me company on all these lone journeys. It's like having 2 good friends chatting in the back seat while I drive. I love it. I've been meaning to write into Freaky Friday for a while, but finally took the jump when I heard you talk about the third man phenomenon a few weeks back on Freaky Friday, and I had to pull over to rewind and listen again. I'd never heard of this phenomenon, and I think it happened to me. In August of 1990, I was 2 years old. My mom was 8.5 months pregnant with my little brother and was really suffering due to the heat at that time of the year. One day, Dad suggested driving over to the big play park on the other side of town to let me have a run around and blow off some steam. Mom agreed to come too, as she wanted to get out of the house. But in a sliding doors moment, she decided as she was putting on her shoes that she was going to stay behind and take a nap instead. Thank goodness she made that decision, as this story might have ended very differently otherwise. Dad took me to the park. We had a great time and then started driving home. On our drive back, a man driving in the opposite direction had an epileptic fit at the wheel, lost control of his car, and careered over to our side of the road, hitting us head on. Cars in the 90s were pretty much made of fiberglass and optimism, so the impact caused our car to flip onto its roof and roll down the embankment at the side of the road, caving the back end as it did so, leaving me trapped inside. My dad crawled out of the wreckage with a broken collarbone, and when emergency services arrived, they found him running around the vehicle in circles, screaming, desperately trying to find a way into the back to try and get me out. The rear of the vehicle was completely cocooned around me, so he couldn't see in and couldn't hear anything. He didn't even know if I was still alive. I have a 2-year-old myself now, and so cannot imagine the absolute terror my dad went through in those moments. Police, ambulance, and the fire brigade all turned up, as by now this was a massive incident with road closures, 2 damaged vehicles, and injuries. In Britain in the 90s, it was a legal requirement to wear a seatbelt, but I remember growing up as a kid, a lot of people didn't always adhere to this law and were a bit fast and loose about wearing them. Luckily for me, my parents were police officers and had dealt with a few road traffic accidents themselves and were absolutely insistent that we always had little booster seats and seatbelts when we were kids. This decision is likely what saved my life, as unbeknownst to my dad, I was very much alive inside the car, dangling upside down, still strapped into my seat with the seatbelt. The firefighters were really struggling to find a way to get me out of the vehicle and were debating what to do. Then, in the most 90s thing I've ever heard, a guy was driving past the scene of the accident, saw all the blue flashing lights, pulled over, and got out to get a better look. He asked the nearest fireman what was going on, and he replied that there was a little girl trapped in that car, and nobody was able to get in to get her out. This bloke was quite slender, so said, nonchalantly, "Shall I have a go?" And the fireman let him. This is the part of the story that I just cannot wrap my head around. The 90s were fucking wild. Health and safety be damned, am I right? This random, unqualified member of the public somehow managed to crawl his way into the wreckage of the vehicle, unclip my seatbelt, pull me out with him, hand me to the nearest fireman, and then got in his car and drove away. I was checked over by paramedics, and amazingly, the only injuries I had were a couple of small cuts to my knee. When the emergency services told the story of my rescuer to my parents, they were fucking stunned. Who was this man? How did he get me out of the wreckage of the car when nobody else could? Why didn't he wait around to be thanked? He just did an amazing thing and walked away. My parents put adverts out in the local newspaper and the radio, asking this man to come forward so they could thank him, but he never did. For years, I just thought there was some good Samaritan walking around somewhere, never telling anyone he saved a little girl at the side of the road. However, since hearing you ladies talk about the third man phenomenon, I've started to wonder if this is what happened. Is that why the man never came forward? Because he didn't really exist? What do you ladies think?
That's incredible that there's just a literal superhero just he's like Superman saving that kid going over Niagara Falls.
Yeah. It's it's wild that the cops would be like, well, we can't figure it out. So yeah, go ahead. Get on in there.
You look pretty thin. You can make it in there. Like, I mean, I guess if everybody else was too meaty to get through and none of the tools are working, it's like, well, we were waiting somebody your size. And that guy's like, I'm this right size and I was on this road at this time and I was called to pull over. Mm-hmm. Or it was Jesus. Jesus, take the wheel.
Third man, or just, he was serendipitously put in the right place at the right time by the universe because you were going to need some help. But that panic you describe of your poor father, I also cannot even begin to imagine the terror that he must have felt during that moment. To think of you okay in there, just hanging upside down, just like, what the fuck just happened? Yeah. But on the outside, not being able to see in and not knowing, oh my gosh, that's heart stopping. I'm so glad you got out of that. And maybe a good Samaritan that just was like, I don't need accolades. Maybe, with something not of this realm. I don't know. The firemen seem to at least interact with him, but
true.
I'd be curious, like, who else saw this guy crawl in and get you out?
Right. That's my question too, is if there were adverts in the local paper and the radio, why did the man not want to come forward? Is it because he didn't exist? Is it because he was a fugitive on the run from the law, but just with a heart of gold?
Yeah,
we'll never know.
Some people just don't like attention. You know,
true.
Once that comes out, you've got people knocking at your door day and night, reporters and stuff. But I like to think he was on the run and he was like, I got to do one last good deed before I head on my way.
He's like, I'm going to go to the medium place because I robbed a bank and I'm on the run, but then I saved a kid. So I get to keep this money, right? Mm-hmm. I'm good. I'm good. But yeah, you are also totally, totally right, Sarah. I'm so glad that your mom was not with you because that sounds like a hell of an accident to be in. Thank God you were safe in the back in your car seat, but I cannot imagine being 8.5 months pregnant, getting thrown upside down and whipped around and stuff. So I'm glad mom was like, it's too hot. I'm gonna stay home.
Always choose the nap. That's the lesson I'm taking from this. But true. Yeah, and you're right. Even like 80s and 90s, but I remember in the 80s, like people didn't, like babies just sat in laps. Kids didn't ride in car seats. It was wild.
I remember some kids would crawl up like almost on like the back dash and stuff. And I'm like, I don't like now you go, oh my God. But yeah, it was pretty loose back then. We would, when we were a kid, we had a Jeep Cherokee and my sister and I would crawl all the way to the way Betty back, but we were only allowed to do this on our street. So like within, 20 or so houses of our house. And we would sit in the way back. And if the streets were clear and there were no cars, my mom's going to kill me for telling this. She played a game called Mom on the Loose, and it would be where we would drive about 20-ish miles an hour, like not too fast down the street. And then she would just like veer from side to side to like tump us from side to side. And we would just like
corners.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like swerving the car back and forth, but it would be like on our street. And it, in hindsight, it was not that fast, but Jeeps are kind of bouncy. And me and Shannon would just bonk into each other and she would go, Mom on the Loose, Mom on the Loose. It's a core memory. I remember that maroon interior just tumping back and forth. But that's the kind of things we did. Now, I hope our younger listeners are like, what did you do now? And I was like, in my day, children, we would take our seatbelts off and swerve the car for fun.
I remember playing corners in carpool in school and stuff where if the person driving turned one way, someone would yell, corner, and then smush. Like if there was like 3 people in the back seat and somebody was taking a left, then the person on the left would smush everybody to the right. So so the person sitting next to the window, you got smushed. I remember playing that one. And it was sometimes intentional, but, I mean, I told you how my mom would roll down the window when I was changing to go to gymnastics and just yell, Christy's naked! Christy's naked! So, yeah, moms in the 80s did some shit that I can't explain.
Those are our core memories, though. What a time. What a time.
Well, thank you so much for sending that in, Sarah. And we're so glad that all of you turned out okay from that.
But if you're the man that was on the run listening, we'll maintain your identity. Just write into us.
Yes, you'll be anonymous, but we just got to know, do you exist?
Yes, are you real? Sinisterhood will be right back. My favorite spring cleaning takeaway is the post-clean clarity you get. Like, wow, how have I been living like this? But it's kind of like when you find out you've been paying a fortune for your wireless when Mint Mobile has plans for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. You're like, wow, how have I been affording this? It's time to switch to Mint Mobile and get unlimited talk, text, and data for $15 a month.
All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts.
We used Mint Mobile for the Sinisterhood official office phone, and we used a phone we already had, so it was so easy. The setup took like 2 seconds. It took no time. Like, I'm not great at any of that. And the setup was great. The service has been great. I feel like it is lightning fast data. It really does feel fast, and we don't have to worry about like how many minutes do we have? Like, we're a business. We need unlimited talk and text.
Unlimited. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Sinisterhood. That's mintmobile.com/Sinisterhood.
Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Sinisterhood. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Well, this next one is from Michelle, and the subject line is, "Help isn't always helpful. A wheelchair user's story." I am a 40-something-year-old woman who was born with a birth defect called spina bifida. I'm mostly paralyzed from my hips down to my toes, and am a full-time wheelchair user. About 7 or so years ago, my husband and I were at a store Christmas shopping. I picked out a few items to gift my husband Dan for Christmas. So, not wanting him to see these items, I checked out before he did and let him know I was going to the car to wait for him. It was dark outside, but the parking lot of the store was well lit. It had recently snowed, and although it was mostly clear, I still had to be mindful of icy patches as I wheeled to our vehicle while also holding onto my shopping bag. Suddenly, I realized that someone was behind me, pushing me along. In those few seconds, I did not panic because I thought it was my husband. He almost always pushes my chair when we're together. Some wheelchair users prefer to always push themselves, and this is also my preference, except when it comes to my husband. I guess it feels comforting to know we're sticking close to one another. I looked back to smile at him, and I felt the blood drain from my head, and my immediate fight or flight response kicked in when I saw an unknown male pushing me. I hadn't heard him coming. He hadn't greeted me or asked if I needed help. He just started pushing. Without thinking, I threw my shopping bag to the side and flung my body to the ground. I guess I figured it would be harder for this guy to take me anywhere against my will if I was out of my chair. I don't know. It was just an immediate reaction. The parking lot had a lot of cars, but he and I were the only people as far as I could tell. I screamed at him to leave me the fuck alone. He explained that he was just trying to help me. I said, "But you don't even know where I'm going." He said I didn't give him a chance to find out. I told him I didn't need his help and to never do that to anyone again. He called me an ungrateful bitch and then stormed off. I was shaking, but managed to get myself back into my chair, retrieved my bag, and wanted to start toward my vehicle again. But I felt disoriented and didn't know whether to stay put, continue on, or turn around to go back in the store and find my husband. I just sat there and started to cry. I felt scared, embarrassed, and confused. Was he just trying to help me? Had I overreacted? Was I too mean to him? The front of my pants was wet from the ground. The knee of my pants had torn, and my knee was scraped and bleeding. The parts of my legs that I can feel, as well as my wrists and shoulders, were throbbing. It all ended up being okay, thankfully. I just don't know what else I would have done other than flop to the ground if he had been trying to hurt me. I was reminded of how helpless I am in certain situations, and thinking about that just makes me angry. I would have a hard time trying to wheel away from someone while also trying to use my phone to call for help at the same time, or trying to use any sort of self-defense object. I guess if I were to have a point to this, it would be to remind people to please ask before just touching someone's wheelchair, no matter how good your intentions. When it's our only source of mobility, the wheelchair really is like an extension of our bodies. Grabbing onto my wheelchair is like grabbing onto me. Thank you for reading this. My husband and I are both mental health therapists, and after very long days of being present with people in their pain, I appreciate your bonus episodes that generally make me laugh, or at least don't add to my stress level. P.S. I don't have anything to show from that night, but here are photos of my husband and I, as well as our kids, Benny, Beso, Balula, and Bob. Warmly, Michelle.
Well, Michelle, your babies,
First of
your
all.
little fur babies are so cute. This little brown one on the right, he's speaking to me.
Oh, I like that big old Roddy looking baby in the middle.
They're all
She's
very
got some
sweet and cute.
good looking pack.
I'm so glad Michelle sent this in because I think this is such an important thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. And like this man who most likely thought he was doing something nice, but like you can't just walk up to someone and do that without first addressing them or asking them, do you need my help? Just assuming that they do is insulting. And also in this case, that's so dangerous. I never thought about that. Like what someone would do in this situation. And I mean, I don't think that you overreacted. I think that you don't know how you're going to react probably until something like that happens. And this guy learned a lesson that day.
No, I think so. I don't think you overreacted at all, Michelle. And I think putting it in the way of my wheelchair is an extension of myself because it is my form of mobility. I agree with that. But even if it's not a wheelchair user, any intimate, close contact without consent is so it's unless someone's literally passing out and about to hit their head on the concrete and you're like, I swooped in to grab them. But somebody that's just like struggling with some boxes or bags or like, she was just making her way to her car. It's not like she had like 16 boxes on top and they were all falling and a truck was speeding towards her. And he's like, I'm so sorry. A truck was speeding at you. I had to save you. It's just this idea. It's quite ableist, frankly, to say, oh, well, she has to have my help.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, oh, would you like to have my help? Could I assist you with something to anyone? It's like, while it's sometimes, I think, rooted in hopefully altruism, the question is like, question your own altruism to assume that just because someone's a wheelchair user, that they're vulnerable in need of help or whatever. It's like still treating people at the core of their humanity and understanding that they have a right to consent to touching, just like everybody has a right to consent to touching, regardless of what sort of mobility aids or devices you use.
Absolutely. Yeah. Describing it as an extension of your body. So if you're touching the wheelchair, it's like touching you, I think is a very powerful way to put that. And I think that a lot of people probably listening are like, I never really thought of that like that. And, that's why I'm so glad that you write in with stories like this. So we get to learn about stuff that otherwise we might just so many of us take for granted.
For sure. And I will, and that's a really great point that Michelle brought up as well, as far as like self-defense, whenever you are having to utilize, your limbs to get away, like how could I also make a call? How could I, we're not sponsored at all by Birdie. This is just something I use, but it's like the Birdie personal alarm and it can fit on your keychain and you yank it apart and throw nearby a piece that makes a super loud alarm and it flashes. So it would just draw a ton of attention to you and it can't be turned off unless you insert these little bitty pins back into it. So if you throw your keys one way and you throw the alarm the other way, it'll just make a lot of attention and they would have to like run one way and get the keys and run the other way to get the alarm. So that might be something. I know it's, that could just be like something you hang on your keychain and grab and chuck it. But I did not think about that of if your arms are taken up and you're trying to balance things.
Yeah.
So that does put you in a vulnerable position. So I think PSA's like, hey, don't just grab a hold of somebody. And so that they feel that way. Because even if it's the best of intentions, you still have that fight or flight response of like, that's not Dan.
Yeah. And it is very ableist to not think like, oh, this might alarm someone if I just go up and start pushing them. And, I think a lot of times it's not even as front of mind as like recognizing you're being ableist. It's just like systemic that's just kind of ingrained in a lot of people. So and if you do something and then the person that you're thinking you're helping reacts in a way that you didn't expect, to then call them an ungrateful bitch and storm off, sir. No, and then it's like, okay, so you weren't really doing this to be altruistic. Because
ding, ding, ding.
Otherwise you would have taken a lesson from this and been very apologetic and like, oh my God, can I help you get back? I didn't even think of that.
That's a good point, because his reaction was not, oh my God, I'm so sorry I startled you. It was ego-driven, selfish, not selfless, of you are ungrateful. You should have thanked me for running up on you, grabbing on you, and startling you. You're welcome,
for doing something I did not ask for.
No!
That's like, and if it's an extension of your body, it's like if somebody just ran up to one of us and picked us up and carried us off to another thing. It's like, what are you even doing right now?
Yeah, but then it's like, oh, thanks a lot. Oh, you're welcome. Like, I was trying to help you. And it's like, that's not the reaction. Like, take your ego out of it and put yourself in that position and say, oh my gosh, I snuck up behind you. You're so right. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. But to be like, oh, I was trying to help you, ungrateful bitch. It's like, that's have crazy. The day you deserve, sir.
No, yeah. Especially as she's laying on the ground in the cold.
Yeah.
Sir, no, he got a flat on the way home for sure.
Hope so.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for sending that in. You and your husband to both be therapists. Thank you for that, too. And what a great picture of the two of you.
Beautiful.
And your little babies, too.
Sinisterhood will be right back. Well, this next one's from Gabriella, and the subject line is, my photo of a ghost at the haunted Baker Hotel. Hello, ladies. I thought I would send in a true North Texas treat for y'all to enjoy today. Let me first set the scene. I was an 18-year-old girl on my last summer break before moving away from the small southwest town I grew up in. I'm now 28. And I was weeks away from embarking on my college journey. If there's one thing about the part of Texas that I grew up in, is that it's hot as the devil's ballsack, and there is nothing to do in the hotter months except to wilt underneath the 100-plus degree temperatures and to break into abandoned hotels with plenty of haunted stories. It was mid-July, and my best friend Cheyenne and I decided on a whim to take a 30-minute drive north to the Parker County Peach Festival. The drive from our town to the festival was a long stretch of desert highway where the speed limit was 85 and required our favorite summer songs and steady cruising. It was my ideal way to end my time in my childhood stomping grounds. However, once we arrived, we quickly found that in order to participate in the festival, we were going to have to park about a mile away and walk in the miserable heat toward the crowded festival. We were instantly uninterested. So, what did we decide to do instead? Well, we decided to take another short drive towards a town called Mineral Wells, Texas. In 2014, Mineral Wells was essentially a ghost town that has since had a small revival. Will be relevant later on. It rose to fame at the turn of the 20th century due to its unique plethora of mineral springs that attracted people from all over to the little cattle town that could. Due to the influx of tourists, artists, and even Hollywood celebrities, they began constructing a high-class, Gilded-Age beauty of a hotel called the Baker in 1926 to entertain and accommodate. Needless to say, this became a hotspot, pun intended, and the town boomed. Sadly, this fame did not last long. As Hollywood glamour faded, the Texas heat became too unbearable for most visitors, and, coupled with a few financial issues, the Baker closed her magnificent doors in 1972 and sat abandoned for decades. There have been many stories of the hauntings at the Baker, and I've always heard whispers of them growing up. There have been many stories of hauntings at the Baker, and I had always heard whispers of them growing up so close to its proximity. We used to drive by the hotel when we would go on family camping trips to the state park once a year. And even as a child, I could feel the pain and suffering that still lived on behind its shattered, lifeless windows. The forgotten hotel stood tall amongst the Texas desert as a memory of the past and of the luxuries that once were. Flashback to 2014. Cheyenne and I thought we would just do some sightseeing around town, maybe grab a soda at the old soda shop on the town square, and do some antique shopping. That day, it was a very quiet town, with just a few people out braving the heat, while we were sat at the bar waiting on some Dr. Pepper ice cream floats. From our seats near the window, we couldn't take our eyes off the towering hotel that rose above the flat land. After some talking and exchanging of stories we'd heard, we slurped up the last of our floats and decided to explore the grounds of the Baker. We walked around the hotel, which had no fencing or any kind of security measures, and we saw the old pool, the original grand steps, and marveled at the way the cactus grew out of the orifices of the outer walls. Sure, we were spooked, but it was broad daylight. What could happen? Well, Cheyenne just happened to notice that there was a window on the second floor that was badly vandalized and busted through. We could easily get to that window by climbing just a few feet of rubble. We just wanted to peek in and see what we could see of the remaining history, all harmless intent, and not technically breaking and entering if the window was already broken, right? So, we did just that. Cheyenne was the first to go in, as she is a fearless Native American who always whispers protection anywhere we go. I stood guard outside of the broken window as she took a walk around. A few minutes later, she poked her head through and asked if I wanted to turn. I never was as brave as her, but she gladly switched to guard mode as I clumsily and frightfully navigated through the broken glass. Cheyenne whipped out her phone, laughing at my fear, and went to snap a photo of me. Here's where things get spooky. As soon as Cheyenne pointed her phone in my direction, I heard a noise behind me. And behind me, even in the broad daylight, was pitch black. I later found out that we were standing in the area of one of the original ballrooms. She snapped the photo, and I ran out, laughing and shaking with anxiety. And we decided that was enough for the day and that we should probably get back home. On the drive home, across the same desert stretch of 85-mile-an-hour road, we were once again blasting our favorite songs and chit-chatting while Cheyenne was going through her camera roll. Suddenly, Cheyenne went dead silent and looked at me. I don't typically see this girl ever look scared, but I'm telling you that I literally saw the blood drain from her face. She went back to looking at her phone, zooming in on a picture of me, when she said, "Holy shit, that's a fucking woman behind you." When I tell you I pulled that car to the shoulder and grabbed the phone out of her hands faster than a bolt of lightning, you better believe me. Sure enough, Cheyenne had captured the exact moment I turned around to see what caused the noise behind me. And standing far off in the distance, right in my line of sight, is a full silhouette of a woman in white. Now, I didn't see anyone in the hotel when I was looking with my own damn eyeballs, but she sure did choose to show up in the photo. We sat on the side of the road for about 15 minutes, trying to rationalize the photo. But any scenario we could think of just didn't work with what we were seeing on that screen. There was a full-body apparition letting us know she was there. I've shown this photo to several people since then. I'm a high school English teacher now, and my students will ask every now and then to see it. And I even showed it to the tour guide when I took 15 high school students on a trip to Salem, Massachusetts. The tour guide said it was one of the clearest apparition photos she'd ever seen. But now, I can't help but wonder if the lady in the photo is still residing there. As of a few years ago, the hotel was bought by a restoration company and has been undergoing intense renovations to restore the hotel back to its original glamour. It really is a wonderful process, as they've been incredibly transparent toward respecting the hotel as a living embodiment of the town's history. And yes, they have addressed some hauntings that have taken place during restoration. I'm attaching photos of the hotel in its original form, my photo of the woman in white, and the restoration process, as well as a link to read up on the history and updated info on its new state. I don't know if this will end up on the air, but if it does, I dedicate it to my little ghost friend at the Baker Hotel.
Well.
What?
We'll share these pictures on social. But
I mean, first of all,
like there's a lady in white.
Straight up, there's just a lady.
An angel, kind of.
Yeah, there's just a lady in a white dress standing behind Gabriella. I've been to we covered the Baker. What episode do we cover?
92, episode 92.
Episode 92, we covered the Baker. And then when I worked at Legal Aid, I had a client that I had to go to a will signing, and shout out to my former intern, current lawyer, Victoria, who's my Victoria. She was my Victoria at Legal Aid. She was my intern at Legal Aid. And I was like, hey, do you want to go on this will signing? It's in Mineral Wells, and we could stop by the Baker. And she's a listener too, and she was like, "Yeah, for sure, let's go." So maybe it was a useful trip for legal aid purposes, but also we got to see the Baker.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote an essay about it because this restoration was going on at the time that we went, and we had stopped at the soda fountain across the street. It was like a soda fountain, coffee shop, also a video store, and they had a huge display of the restoration.
Just make it all one.
It was just everything,
you know.
Speaking
Small towns,
of everything,
you got to lump it all together.
Mineral Wells is everything. That town is crazy, is what they call themselves, because the
Crazy
water.
water.
You'll hear all about it in episode 92.
You got me a crazy water candle.
I did. That's right.
I still have
That's
it.
right. Yeah, Gabriella, I think you saw something because if that episode, it got me nervous about it. Like we didn't go in there. There's a fence around it now.
Now you can't go in it. I have been keeping my eye on the restorations because once it's finished, we certainly want to go have a little staycation there for sure.
Absolutely. It looks like, I mean, when it was open way back when, it was like exactly like Gabrielle said, it's like decadent, it's beautiful, and it seems like they're really going to try to restore of it as much of it as they can while also updating it. But it is a huge ass hotel, so it has been a huge process and undertaking.
Yeah. This is I don't have an explanation. I'd be curious what the Ghost Guild would say.
Oh yeah.
It would be hard to recreate, but perhaps there's like a pillar there or some kind of plaster or something. But just looking at this picture, it does look like someone standing in a white dress.
Yeah, I would swerve my car off to the side of the road. Certainly. Absolutely. Absolutely, I did.
Yes.
Yeah, that is...
especially if you heard a sound right before that happened, too.
Yeah, we'll post the zoomed out photo and the zoomed in photo, because zoomed out, you can tell that she's looking over her shoulder. And, like, what a time to have that sound and then for that to show up on the camera. Woo!
Yeah, and she didn't see it, but it showed up.
Oh, I can't wait.
That's interesting, too, is she didn't see it, but the camera picked it up, which could be the flash or something on the camera caught something, or it's a paranormal, like the lady in Salem said, one of the best pictures she's seen of an apparition.
It is certainly eerie. Well, we'll all keep our eye on when the baker's going to open up and let y'all know about that and see if we can get in there and find what the old ballroom is, because I wonder kind of what if they're still, because I think the new one will still have a ballroom. When we were there, the lady was saying, because I was engaged at the time, so it was, if I worked at Legal Aid and I was engaged 2021ish, and the lady said, oh, well, you're engaged, and Victoria was dating someone seriously. They've now gotten married, and we were both like, oh yeah, we're probably planning weddings soon. She's like, well, it won't be open for like 4 more years, but maybe we're like, well, maybe a vow renewal, because it's still not done. And that was, but the pandemic's been there in the interim, and I imagine it's probably not super easy to get, because Mineral Wells isn't like close. It's like west of Fort Worth.
It's not a big town. Yeah. So a lot of stuff's going to have to be shipped on in there, but I'm excited that a ballroom is going to be there, and I'm sure it'll be a huge event venue place too,
spa destination too. Well, thank you, Gabriella, and y'all let us know what y'all think about this picture. Sinisterhood. We'll be right back. Well, this next one is also from Sarah. Thank you very much for sending in a second story, and the subject line is a phantom shitter. For first, you have a third man saving you from a car, and now a phantom shitter. Sarah writes, during the mid-2000s, my student job was working at the local community library. It was a lovely place, and as an avid reader, I loved being able to borrow all the new books as soon as they came out. I was the only student there, and all my colleagues were older ladies who took me under their wing and really looked after me. I'm still friends with a couple of them to this day. One day, during my induction training, my favorite colleague, I'll call her Violet, took me to one side and said, just a heads up, watch where you step when you're putting the books back on the shelves. We've got a phantom shitter. Pardon? I stuttered, thinking I'd misheard her. We have a phantom shitter? She shrugged, as if this was the most normal thing in the world to encounter in the workplace. Turns out, the library had been plagued by a phantom shitter for a good couple of years before I started working there. Whoever they were, they would come into the library and shit in the middle of one of the aisles, leaving a steaming pile for a horrified librarian to find. They didn't even choose the same aisle every time. They mixed it up. Sometimes the poo would be amongst the periodicals. Another time it would be in the biography section. Library management couldn't believe that a member of the public was able to sashay into the library, drop their drawers, and squat down to poop without the staff noticing. So, they installed CCTV, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. However, the CCTV never captured any evidence, yet the poos kept coming. For years! Nobody ever worked out who it was or why they were doing it. And then, one day, many years after I left, I might add, the poos stopped as suddenly as they'd started. I've often wondered who on earth could it have been? Was it a disgruntled employee smuggling poo into the library in their pocket? Or a member of the public who somehow managed to evade the watchful eyes of the camera and staff every time? Or was the phantom shitter true to their name and not of this world? Did they stop because they died or moved towns? Or did they stop because they'd completed their unfinished business and crossed to the other side? What do you ladies think? Thank you for giving the listeners such a safe space to share our stories. Keep it creepy, Sarah. First of all, unfinished business, fucking classic. She put it in quotes. She knew what she was doing. That's such a good joke, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah. Both these stories were great, Sarah. She sent them in one, but I broke them up because we had to end on a phantom shitter.
Come
what
on
are we
now.
talking about? Oh, man. I'll tell you what. I did not know until the past few years how common it is for people to just shit in public places. Like on Reddit, the amount of people that have worked in retail that are like, oh yeah, they'll just shit in a dressing room. Like I work at Target or at tanning salons apparently is a huge one.
Not in the bed.
In the trash cans.
Oh.
I read this
that's
whole
terrible.
thing. And
I was
people were like, why would they do that? And they're like, I guess because usually you undress and then maybe the heat gets something going and you don't want to put your clothes back on. Plus it's timed. So like you can't, your timing of the bed, you know.
You don't want to pay for any more time.
So instead you just shit in a trash can. And then I'm like, you think they don't know that was you?
Yeah.
Now you got to find a new tanning salon. You can't go back there after that.
It's got to be a one and done because the tanning salon is a booth-like situation. I thought you meant the bed, and I was like, that has so many horrible implications. I won't even get into it. But anything like that where it's like a dressing room, if they're monitoring the dressing room, I'm like, they know who just came out of there. I only knew about dressing room shitters because my friend Gypsy worked retail way back when before she was a teacher and had horror stories of like dressing room shenanigans and stuff. And another friend worked at like Old Navy or Target or whatever. And
I did too, but luckily not
in Diarrhea Town. Yeah.
No, I didn't deal with that. I don't think I worked there long enough,
Texas, but apparently
it's bananas to me that unless you were, having some sort of an episode, why you would choose to do that instead of going to the bathroom.
Yeah, and it seems like this one's not like, because if it was just a once off or once every however, but if it is a specifically placed pile in an area, what you guys should do is cross-reference who checked what out. And then if somebody, because maybe that's just their review of books. So if they check a book out every week and they like the book, then you're not going to get it. But if they don't like it, you're going to get it. Yeah, that's the review. They're like, what did you think of the book? He's like, oh, go back to reshelf it and you'll find out. It's like, I don't want to reshelf this book.
Damn. Yeah, and to be warned of that. I mean, she's a real one for warning you, but also you're like, I'm sorry, what was that?
We have a phantom, what now? And they're like, the library is a bit haunted, but not the way you think. Yeah, shout out to Violet for being like, well, part of the unofficial training is you need to look down when you go to reshelf the books. You don't be distracted. Don't hold a bunch of books in your arms such that you can't see your feet. Make sure you can.
And then it's like a banana peel situation.
The way that if I slipped, especially if I slipped in it, but even if I just stepped in it, the way that I would camouflage myself in books, like I would somehow, and I would wait every hour of every day until I found them, and then I would beat them senselessly with a book. Yes. Be like, you motherfucker. If you you made me slip in your dookie in the library.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
It's over.
One time maybe it's like an emergency. I don't know. I had never considered someone bringing it in their pocket and just Shawshank style, like, like just jiggling it out.
Yeah.
Onto the floor.
It's almost like, if it were one thing like, oh, well, it's always in so-and-so's office or whatever, but it's so strange that it is just like in random places. But maybe it's the guy that saved you from the car. He left. He's also invisible. He was trying to communicate somehow.
He's like, I was a third man, but I'm still with you, child.
Yes, I've never left your side, but
well, it stopped. So somebody, whenever stuff like this stops or like, I mean, much more heinous, but when like, you know, a string of killing stops, you're like, well, that person had to have died, right? Or like moved on. Like, but see, you got to contact some other libraries and be like, have y'all had anything happen? Because he may have moved on, but he may still be doing it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or she or they.
Right.
Or You know, maybe it's a ghost, who knows? But the fact that it can't even be captured by CCTV, you're either real aware of the cameras or you're invisible.
You know, phantom shitters never die. They just move on to different stacks, I guess. Oh, Sarah, what a pair of tales, and everybody for your tales today. These were indeed falling under the odd but true moniker, and we always appreciate your generosity with sharing them with us.
Absolutely. Thank you to everyone for sending in your Freaky Friday stories. If you have an odd but true story, maybe you've encountered Bigfoot, you've seen a UFO, you had a brush with true crime, or you felt the presence of an otherworldly being, send them in at sinisterhood.com/Freaky Friday. If you like our free episodes, you'll love our Patreon bonus content. You can join for free just to see what we're up to next, and you also get an archived bonus content once a month, or you can join and dive into over 900 hours of segments like Judge Christie, Dear Sinister. We just had one, True Crime Headlines, all updates on cases we've covered.
We talked about some mini-sodes we've covered and main feed episodes we've covered. And if you're at the Rolling the Airwaves or Getting Into It tier, we do a monthly live stream Q&A. You jump on Crowdcast, you ask us anything. We answer the top 20 most upvoted questions. They're always so much fun. And the June live stream is going to be Tuesday, June 25th at 8 p.m. Central. You can go on Patreon to sign up. There's also a link in our Instagram bio if you want to sign up for that. But it's always a ton of fun. And you can submit questions in advance. If you can't be there live, you can submit a question. If people vote on your questions, we also have a live stream replay immediately afterwards. The replay is automatically available. And then the next day or two, we do audio only as another bonus for you. Because sometimes people just want to listen and not look at our faces. That's fine. I'm not offended by that at all.
Listen in the car or something.
Yeah, that's true. That makes sense. But no, we also have our monthly mini-sodes. We have ad-free episodes and a community of the best listeners on the whole internet. So
absolutely,
check it out. Head over to sinisterhood.com and click shop on the top banner to check out merch like t-shirts, mugs, totes, stickers, and even clothes for your kiddos. And if you're a Patreon member, don't forget to go to the pin post to get your discount code for merch.
While you're on our website, you can also review the show. We make it super simple to leave us a review. You can follow us on socials and check out the episode description. And you'll also find fun things like topic-based playlists and links to all those live shows for the Full Moon Energy Tour.
You can follow us on Instagram and Threads at Sinisterhood Pod. Like us on Facebook at Sinisterhood. You can watch full video episodes of the show early and ad-free on Patreon, and then a few days later on YouTube, as well as clips from Freaky Friday Story of the Week on YouTube, as well as our TikTok. Both of those are at Sinisterhood Podcast. And if you want to order a custom video shout out of your own, head over to cameo.com/Sinisterhood and order a cameo. We could say happy birthday, happy anniversary, you got this, a pep talk, congrats on the new job, happy wedding, happy...
McGruff can cuck your husband.
Yeah, McGruff can cuck your husband. Horsehead Lady Body is still available. I'm just saying, at cameo.com.
Fuckmouth Moon is dying to get in on this. Nobody's requested Fuckmouth Moon yet, and honestly, he's being a little bit of a diva about
really
it.
Sad.
So somebody could request him. It'd help us out a lot.
Soon his fuck mouth's going to go from a fuck mouth to a frown mouth.
Frown mouth moon. Nobody wants that.
Not at all. Christy, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on Instagram and Threads at Christy M. Wallace and TikTok at Christy or GTFO. Heather?
I'm on the internet at Heather versus the world.
As always, the devil rules the airwaves.
Keep it creepy. Sin